Sickness cover versus ACC, there's obviously an imbalance there.
Yes, there is, and that's sort of changed a little bit in more recent times. I think in order to understand that properly, we need to understand what's defined by an accident. And in general terms, and there are exceptions to this, but in general terms, an accident is where there is a specific incident on a specific day at a specific time that's caused a specific injury directly. That's an accident. Fall over, break a leg, it's an accident. ACC take both responsibility or liability for the medical procedures around that, and there are a little bit of exceptions to that, as well as as well as a loss of income, a compensation. One of the reasons that ACC started in the first place was because it's a no-blame system. It means that people can't sue other people who may be responsible for that injury because it is a specific incident, if that makes sense. Now, if it falls outside of that, it's illness, and illness is not in any way the responsibility of ACC or the Accident Compensation Corporation, both in terms of the medical procedures that may need to be done or the loss of income as a result of that ailment, if that makes sense.
Can you be a bit specific, Barbara Lee, about some of the sicknesses that are covered?
Well, ACC doesn't cover any sicknesses. It's accident-based only. So to have a good contract around an illness and an injury, you want something that's going to pick up issues like mental health. That's stress.
Mental health?
Yes, stress, anxiety, depression. That's a big risk for somebody that's particularly self-employed people. So
my instant reaction was surprise, because you think of this sickness being heart, lungs, brain tumour, whatever, but
anything that you go to the doctor for and the doctor says, look, you can't work for whatever reason, that's covered in your illness and injury contract.
Because depression does stop people working.
It sure does. It can have a big effect on their ability to work.
And that's under your sickness and accident.
That's right. So we have covers that can pay people every month until they're able to go back to work. There's many types of covers in there, and it's just important that they're matched up with the person for the occupation, for their individual needs.
And coming back to you, I guess self-employed people invariably don't take much of a disposable income, and so ACC rub their hands in glee.
Well, I don't know whether they do that. They just it's just quite clear. I don't think rubbing their hands in glee is quite fair. ACC is based around 80% of an individual's taxed income. Really simple. If you're on a salary or a waged earner, if you're on $100,000 a year, you get 80,000 for the sake of keeping it simple. That's taxed, so ACC tax that as it's earned, so it's under the same PAYE system that they would as an employee. When you're in a self-employed person who takes drawings, of course you furnish your tax return at the end of the year, and that tax return mitigates certain expenses. So it does not necessarily reflect on what that person brings into the business or what they're responsible for the revenue that they generate. So ACC just compensate them based on 80% of their individual earnings. So again, if you take the $100,000, for example, that a self-employed person brings in, and then he is entitled to take his work-related expenses off that. It might be running a vehicle, it might be his computer expenses, there might be a number of things that are in there. And ultimately, he might pay tax on, say, $60,000 because he's had $40,000 worth of expenses. So his ACC entitlement then is 80% of $60,000. And it's taxed before he gets it, which is, and most self-employed people, they're not used to that. They're used to getting a tax bill, not taken out before they get that. So in the end, what they're bringing in is an awful lot less than what they were if they were on ACC.
So Barbara Lee, that means basically that if they insure themselves, rather than relying on ACC, that it's a better package because they can dictate how much they do need.
Oh, absolutely. They're in control then. So covers like medical cover, so you're not on a waiting list, or you might want access to drugs that Pharmac don't fund. And then your income type covers are going to pay you every month. So if the doctor, it's as simple as, if the doctor says you can't work, signs you off, not able to work, then we'll just pay every month. I think if anyone's ever had a situation where they've been in a hospital with somebody, and you go into that hospital and, the people are in there for an accident or an illness, and you see how, it's quite imbalanced, isn't it? ACC people are being sort of taken care of, and those that have an illness, what's available to them is quite restricted, sometimes nothing. And there is a real imbalance there, and the best way to keep that even is to take control yourself.
Is there enough in an insurance policy to do that, or do you still get topped up by ACC?
There's enough in an insurance policy. So if a person has an accident and they have a private medical insurance, ACC takes the first claim, it takes the first responsibility, liability. But often we have claims where there's some form of surgery where it could be ACC and private medical insurance on a joint venture. Once again, it's about funding and timing, and often with ACC, certain specialists get certain funding at certain times of the year, and they have to fit their allocated procedures around that funding. So if they're coming near the end of their funding and they're running out of money, then they'll bump it to the following financial portion, if you like. Whereas if it's a joint venture between ACC and the private medical insurer, then it can be done at a lesser cost to the ACC, and therefore the procedure can be speeded up quite a bit. It happens quite often.
See, I talk a wee bit about my own personal situation. I lifted some bits and pieces when I was shifting back into my house and got a hernia, and ACC said no, that wasn't an accident. So, but luckily I had health insurance. So, and that's this. I mean, you can't. What I'm trying to say is, I wouldn't. If I'd relied on ACC, I'd probably still have a hernia.
Yeah, there are some things that have changed over the years. So, once upon a time, work-related issues such as we used to call it occupational overuse syndrome, like carpal tunnel, hernia, all those sorts of things. ACC have become a lot more stricter on those and saying, well, actually, they're not as a result of an accident. They're just a result of wearing out. Now, that might be a combination between what you do in your personal life and what you do in your work life. So it's not necessarily just a work-related incident. However, there are exceptions to that. So there are some things that ACC accept that it is long-term work-related, and therefore they will take some responsibility. But yes, they've become a little bit stricter on that. And to some degree, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's become more defined.
But
In
I
my
think if you
case,
want,
it was sorry.
I think if you want certainty around anything, you've got to take control, haven't you? You have to put your own plan in place.
That's right.
And then you know exactly what's going to happen if you do have any types of events.
I'm going to be quite pointed and say that by the sound of it, there's so many exceptions, Barbara Lee, that you need actually to talk to somebody like either of you two. Because
That's right.
you actually know, it's like a farm accountant, isn't it?
That's right. The advice process is where, that people get value out of. We have access to all companies and we give independent free advice. It's awesome, isn't it?
There's a bit of a trend to buy off television now. You look at a television ad and they say, hey, give us a ring and sign up, or just send us a text and or an email and we can do you for that.
It's not that easy, really. At the end of the day, we talked before about how you can get, income compensation around depression or mental health issues. And there is a large proportion of claims around mental health issues. A lot of that's proportionate around the occupational classifications. So professional people, dare I say it, accountants, lawyers, those sorts of people have a far higher claim rate for depression than, say, your builder, who's got a far higher claim rate for things like accidents or getting worn out, basically. So when you've had one of those issues, of course, then because it's such a high claimed, it's so much harder to get that covered going forward. So the longer you leave it and the longer more issues that you have, the harder it is to get good and complete cover.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And obviously you go to somebody who does actually know.